Nigel Farage Show.
Well, the Catalonian leader has said that Spain's attempt to humiliate his region is an attack on democracy. It's as the country's Prime Minister says there will be new elections to the Catalan Parliament, probably in 6 months' time, and that the removal of the region's autonomy following its independence referendum is going to happen pretty soon. Just before we came on air this morning, I spoke to James Badcock, who is a freelance reporter in Madrid, and I began by asking him to explain to us what Article 155 is all about.
It's part of the Spanish Constitution, so it's the 40-year-old Spanish Constitution, and it's never actually been used in anger, as it were, in 40 years. And what it does is it gives, it's very vaguely worded, we've never seen it used before, it gives a government, which has to be supported by the Senate, the upper house of Parliament, the power, basically it can use necessary measures to bring into line any regional authority in Spain, which is, outside the law, which is doing something which is overstepping its powers, as is the case in Catalonia, which has, held a referendum which wasn't legal, and is talking about declaring independence. So it's very vague, and this government has, yesterday, was drawn up its plans of how it wants to use 155, and I think we're all quite shocked today at how harsh the measures could be.
So the Prime Minister, Rajoy, will put this to the Senate at some point this week, is that right?
Yep, on Friday. It's already been arranged that the vote will be on Friday, and Mr. Rajoy's Popular Party has a majority already. But on top of that, for extra political support, he's got the opposition socialists and the fourth largest party, Ciudadanos, to support these measures.
So this gets passed on Friday. What happens next Saturday? Does the Spanish government literally just go in and take over all the buildings in Catalonia, the government buildings?
Well, yes. How it will physically play out is what could be fascinating and could be slightly alarming. But in theory, on Saturday it will be published in a state bulletin that this power has been passed, and that basically the Catalan government, all of them, the ministers, the vice president, and President Puigdemont, will be dismissed.
This almost sounds third world. I thought Spain was a modern democracy. Surely the Catalans have a right, do they not, to express an opinion? Expressing opinion is one thing, but they certainly don't have the right, as the rules of the game are within the Spanish Constitution, to declare independence. Now, this was triggered by the Spanish government, with Prime Minister Rajoy, asking, first, you can't just go to the Senate and say we want these powers. First, there has to be communication with the regional authority to ask them, to explain what they're doing, and are they outside the law, and can they please rectify? And so Mr. Rajoy asked Puigdemont if Catalonia had declared independence, and his reply was equivocal. He didn't really confirm or deny it. And now the situation, what's really going to be fascinating is, as we said, it's on Friday, the Senate debate and vote. Now, Mr. Puigdemont has one sort of last option, if you like, before we get to the clash next weekend that he's officially dismissed. He could, and he has threatened to, go back to the Catalan Parliament and, before it's sort of emasculated by these measures, and put independence to a vote there. And that would be UDI, wouldn't it? A Universal Declaration of Independence, which presumably, James, would mean that violence of some kind would be unavoidable.
I sometimes worry about this, and I voice this fear, but the Catalan independence movement always says, no, it's not possible. But I think that some sort of unrest would be inevitable. Spain's chief prosecutor is preparing sort of treason charges, really, against Mr. Puigdemont. There would perhaps be some move to try and have him arrested if Parliament, if he took a unilateral declaration to Parliament and they actually voted on it. So to remind us that it was sort of floated as a possibility in Parliament after the referendum, but there wasn't a formal vote. So, therefore it wasn't really a declaration.
No.
So
So, yes, it's quite possible to imagine pretty serious disturbances in the street, but actual violence and there's talk of another civil war, let's hope that's still...
we all hope that's not...
Still an exaggeration.
We all hope that's not the case. Tell me, the European Union, who were studiously quiet after all the police brutality a few weeks ago, what is their position on this now?
The European Union has, the main leaders of the European Union, with exceptions such as the Belgian Prime Minister, have rallied around the Spanish government. We saw that in the summit last weekend. We heard Mr. Macron, we heard Merkel, and the Commission President, all saying basically that they supported Spain, they support the Spanish Constitution and constitutional order in Spain.
And that was Theresa May's position too, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, exactly. Really, they're treating this as an internal matter, I suppose. Just to say, you might get complaints from opposition politicians in Hungary about, the election rules or freedom of the press there, but the European Union doesn't seem able to intervene in these kind of issues.
Well, they're very good, James, at criticising the Hungarian government and criticising the Polish government and often criticising the British government, but the Spanish government, it would seem, can do no wrong.
It is also this can of worms, isn't it, of secession. I think there are other countries that have regions that, could they think would get restive as well.
Well, that was the view that we got there from Madrid, and that's what the government is saying, that, they're using necessary force, as they have over the last few weeks. They're enforcing the rule of law, and Carles Puigdemont, the president of Catalonia, could well finish up in prison on effectively treason charges. I have to say, when you hear there's a leader of a nationalist, separatist movement in southern Europe, you sort of conjure up this figure of some sort of very fiery, noisy, big public orator. And actually, this guy, when you listen to him, comes across as the most mild-mannered nationalist I think I've ever heard of. But let's get the view from Barcelona. Let's get the other side of the argument, because, we're going to debate. Is this an attack on democracy, or is it the correct interpretation of Spanish law? Let's get a view from Barcelona. Let's go to Jim Kent. He's the owner of Barcelona City FM. He's lived in Barcelona for a few years. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. Now, I saw the pictures of reportedly hundreds of thousands of Catalans out on the streets of Barcelona yesterday. Tell me about that.
Yes, we had about 500,000 Catalans. Now, the main tenet of that particular protest was concerning political prisoners, because the two Jordis, as they now know, they were the leader of the Catalan National Assembly. They were arrested about a week ago and are still being held by Madrid authorities, and people wanted to express their anger about that. And I would say, don't underestimate the strength of passion here of the Catalans in this debate. Even though the rule of law on one side might look as though it's against them, they are getting ready. This protest is not going away. It's not going anywhere.
No, and of course, when they did hold that referendum, and I know lots of people were stopped from voting, but of the 43% turnout, about 90% voted to secede, didn't they?
Yeah, that's correct. So in the minds of the nationalists, they feel as though they have a mandate. They know that the vote was not perfect, but nevertheless, they would say that there's a vast swath of individuals here in Catalonia who not only want to be independent, believe they have a right, a democratic right, to be independent. And in the address given by Puigdemont last night, he says Madrid have gone back to the days of Franco in terms of enforcing their will over this region. Yeah, well,
I have to say, I find it rather difficult myself to disagree with that point of view, because surely people are allowed to express an opinion. And, of course, the way we dealt with this, with Scottish nationalism, was to have a referendum. And that strikes me as being the best thing. But let me just ask you, Jim, sort of look in the crystal ball, and this is difficult, but next Friday, Article 155 gets debated and voted on in the Spanish Senate. We've been told this morning from Madrid that's pretty much a formality. So then the next day or the day after, the Spanish state starts to take over government buildings. What are people such as the police force, such as the civil servants, are they going to accept that suddenly they're under direct rule from Madrid,
rather than their own Catalan senior officers that they had the day before?
Yeah. You mentioned the police, and for sure that's a very, very interesting issue. What we actually expect is to see the local police effectively divide down the middle, because here in Catalonia, with the Mossos police force, many of them are very ardent nationalists, and there's no way that they will ever take orders directly from Madrid. So we're creating the potential of seeing police on both sides of the protest.
Do you, Jim, do you fear this could turn ugly?
I do, and I think the key point will be this issue of political prisoners is a really hot issue here. So if Madrid continue, and if they arrest any of the political leaders, including even Puigdemont himself,
yes,
it's very unpredictable to see the response. Without doubt, you'll see 1 million people on the streets. But what that will lead to is hard to know. I mean, I've spoken to many Catalans in recent days, and many of these people, they grew up in the time when the Basque separatist issue was violent. Here in Catalonia, it was always peaceful.
Yes.
But these people now tell me, now we understand why they had to go to such violent lengths, because Madrid won't engage in dialogue.
Yeah, and is Puigdemont right? In your view, you're there, you've got a business in Barcelona. Do you think he's right when he says that the behaviour of Rajoy, the Prime Minister, is an attack on democracy?
Rajoy has been incredibly heavy-handed, but you do mention business. This prolonged nationalistic issue, it's really hurting the economy. For sure, there are less tourists here on the streets than normal.
Yep.
And I should just mention that the tapas is still good, the sun is shining, and Gaudi is still here. So tourists don't need to worry about that. But yeah, there's a knock on the real day-to-day businesses, and so you'll find they'll be pushing against Puigdemont. See, let's have a resolution as quickly as possible, please.
Yeah, I get it.
For the economy.
Jim Kent, owner of Barcelona City FM, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, folks, you've listened to two sides of an argument. You've heard the arguments for the Spanish imposing direct rule. You've heard the arguments from Barcelona, well, both sides of the argument from Barcelona, but, I think Jim Kent there saying to you, don't underestimate the passion. 500,000 people on the streets yesterday, already political prisoners, this very serious situation. So do you agree when Puigdemont says, do you agree that this is an attack on democracy, or is it just Spanish law being obeyed? Your views in a moment. Right now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:16. You've heard both sides of the argument, so it's your turn now, and that's the point about this show. It's the point about LBC. It's the only medium on a Sunday where you get the chance to give us your opinions. Do you think what is happening in Catalonia, with local autonomy on the verge of being suspended and the Spanish state about to come in, take over government buildings, do you see this as an attack on democracy, or is it just the Spanish law being obeyed? Call me on 0345 6060 973 to give me your view. And if you're in Spain, please call and we will give you priority. Absolutely. Of course, equally, you can text your views on this to 84850. You can tweet your opinions using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can watch this live on Facebook and comment there. My first caller on this subject is Nick, who is calling from Harlow. Nick, good morning.
Morning, Nigel. Nice to speak to you again.
Good to you. So what do you think, Nick?
I don't want to give an opinion as to whether this is an attack on democracy, but what I do want to point out is a very important thing, which is the EU response to it. Now, whether the Spanish are violating their democratic principles, it's a debatable point. Whether they're violating their own laws, yes, they are. The referendum that was held was not lawful, but it was not illegal. Okay? But contrast, for instance, the EU's approach to Yugoslavia, particularly Krajina in Croatia in 1992.
Oh, well, they jumped the gun in recognising it, didn't they?
Well, of course. They were like, yes, come, join us, be part of us. We want your stuff. Whereas where a particular breakaway separatist part of the country goes, no, we don't want to be part of this anymore, they go, oops, that's a bit of a problem. And no, you can't. So it's not really internally logical and consistent, is it?
Actually, Nick, it is logical and consistent, totally, because the Europe...
Depending on how evil you think they are.
Well, I've been there a long time, and I remember Juncker's predecessor, Mr. Barroso, the former Maoist from Portugal, who now is, I think he's the deputy chairman of Goldman Sachs globally. I mean, how you go from Maoism to Goldman Sachs, I mean, it's a heck of a leap.
What's the difference?
Well, sometimes the circles meet, perhaps, yeah. No, what was it? I mean, he said that the European Union was an empire. He said, we're building an empire. And, Nick, I think what happened 25 years ago, I think the European Union actually assisted in the destruction in Yugoslavia. I think...
Yes, they did.
I think its actions...
They made a complete hash of it.
Well, I think it's worse than...
Hash.
No, I think it's worse than that, Nick. Because, you know, they always say, look at us, we're wonderful in Brussels. I mean, we've stopped the Germans coming over the Rhine again. Well, the Germans were never going to...
No, they haven't.
I mean, well, that's an economic argument. But the idea that the European Union is all about peace, and what I see is much of what they did with the recognition of Croatia, etc., actually helping to provoke some of the terrible things that happened in the Balkans. And then they decided they want to expand it eastwards into the Ukraine, which led to the overthrow of an elected prime minister. So, but I don't think they are about peace, but the point is, the consistency is they want to build the empire. And they can see these Catalan separatists don't just want to leave... You've gone.
There is one more point I'd like to add in, and I run the risk here of being a tinfoil hat person.
Mm-hmm.
So this is getting into a very risky area. But consider, the logical outcome of this is going to be incredible unrest in Catalonia. The Spanish government is going to intervene. Nasty things are going to happen. It's not going to end very well. It's probably not going to end terribly. I mean, I don't think we're looking at another Yugoslavia. But I would postulate that this will be the first deployment of a combined EU army to assist a recognized member of the EU in keeping internal order.
Well, they won't need it. They won't need the army, Nick. I'll tell you why, because they've got something called Eurogen 4, the Euro Gendarmerie Force. It's existed for a few years. At the moment...
I'm aware of that, Nigel.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment...
And you successfully deploy it, isn't that a massive PR coup?
I think that in many ways that may well be true. I think there is no point in having European armies or European police forces or European special riot squads. There's no point having them unless you actually use them. And of course, for those that want statehood for the European Union, the very act of doing these things is part of it. I mean, I remember Verhofstadt.
It would be a great test case, wouldn't it?
You know, I remember Verhofstadt in 2012 when France and the UK started bombing Libya. I remember Guy Verhofstadt, who, you know, is now the European Parliament's chief negotiator, you know, banging the table saying we must bomb as the European Union, not as individual member states. So you know, they want these rights of statehood, and they want, they want to act as nations act. So yeah, I've certainly got some concerns about that. But these Catalan separatists, Nick, they are fiercely Eurosceptic, and I think that, above all, you know, is what
is a risk.
I think that's what they're scared of.
It's a risk and it's an opportunity for the EU.
An opportunity for them to as you say, use their forces, flex their muscles. But the risk is, I mean, frankly, Nick, I'd say this to you: if the Catalans were to break away by some means as a completely independent state, independent of Spain, independent of the European Union, if that was to happen, that would make Brexit. That would make Brexit look like a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and that's exactly the point, isn't it? That is exactly the point. Nick, listen. Well, no, absolutely. But look, the point you've made about the sheer, you know, on the face of it, the sheer inconsistency with recognising Croatia, aiding and abetting the breakup of Yugoslavia, but taking the opposite opinion when it comes to Spain. I think, given the sort of broad historical swathe of this, I think you've got this absolutely bang on the money. Nick from Harlow, I thank you very much indeed. Natalie comes through on Facebook and says, you do realise the EU is not interested in sorting out Europe. It wants everyone to suffer. Sorry, Greece. Sorry, Spain. Well, I'm not sure, Natalie. I mean, I'm Eurosceptic, but I'm not sure they actually willfully want people out there to seriously be hurt. I'm not sure they would, you know, I mean, come on. France, Germany. OK, you can be really cynical and say those guys want to run the European Union for their own benefit. You know, they want this to be a political union that they're in control of. I don't think any of them ever have actually wished ill and wished suffering, but they're prepared to see suffering in Greece to maintain the integrity of the euro. They're prepared to see companies that export to the United Kingdom perhaps have to start paying, the customers have to start paying tariffs, and they do that because they want to preserve the idea that no country can actually leave the European Union. So they do things at times that are against the interests of people, against the interests of companies, and against the interests of countries in the name of this larger supranational structure. But I don't think they ever from the start willfully set out to do something that would genuinely hurt people. Christian says on Facebook, on the Spanish attacks against democratic voters, imagine what a European army would do. Well, Christian, you are backing up the point that was made there by Nick. Not only do they have a European army, they've got their own, effectively, they've got their own riot squads, and they're in training. There are about 8 or 9 member states are part of this, but it would be used in extremist to deal with violence. And there are many, I must say, there must be people today listening to this in Ireland and countries like that, countries that have been neutral countries, and yet they now find themselves part of a union that is militarising, that has an expansionist foreign policy, and I think many people in countries like Ireland would be very, very worried indeed. And on Twitter, I get... No, that's for the previous one. But listen, I'll take any opinions you've got on this. You've heard both sides of the argument. Is this an attack on democracy, or is it just the Spanish enforcing their own rules? Tell me what you think. Call me on 0345 60 60 973. And particularly, if you're in Catalonia or Spain, you will go right to the top of the list. Right now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. Well, as the Spanish government prepares to take away autonomy from Catalonia, I'm asking you, is this oppression? Is this crushing democracy? Or is it just the correct way for the Spanish to interpret and use their law? And we do have some breaking news. Spain says that British expats will be allowed to continue living in the country even if the UK leaves the European Union without a Brexit withdrawal deal. Spain's Foreign Minister Alfonso Dastis says the lives of ordinary Britons will not be disrupted. There is another Remainer argument blown out of the water. You said if we voted Brexit, they'd all be rounded up in prison ships and sent back to Portsmouth. Complete and utter baloney, as it always was going to be. I wonder what would happen, frankly, to the economy in much of southern Spain if it wasn't for the British expats down there spending their money. I'm also fascinated by the timing of this. Fascinated. Is this Spain trying to show us and the others what really nice guys they are before they send the troops and the police in to take over the Catalan Parliament and all the organs of state? I wonder. Also, we're getting reports that Catalan separatists would surround the Parliament to prevent any arrest of Carles Puigdemont, their president. So I think whichever way you look at this, the tensions are getting greater and greater, and the risk of something unpleasant happening, it can't be ignored. Look, already there are 2 political prisoners in the space of the last week. This is how Spain is behaving. They say, after they've taken autonomy, 6 months or so on, they'll hold fresh elections. To me, the only way you can deal with this is to have a full, free and fair referendum in Catalonia and let the Catalans make their decision. If you try and suppress, particularly with violence, if you try and suppress separatist views or separatist debates, all you will do is to feed it. That's my view. Angela is calling me from Norfolk. Angela, good morning.
Hello, good morning. I listen to LBC all the time, and this is the first time I've ever phoned. So
is it? So what's
quite a meaningful subject?
Well, no, thank you, Angela. And what has made you pick up the phone?
Well, I'm half British, half Catalan, and I have lived in the UK more than half of my life. But of course, I still follow the developments, quite keenly. And I actually studied history, and I have a family who are very political. People died in the Civil War, the usual Catalan stories of great misery. My feeling about all of this, and I was very young when it happened, so I'm only going on, history lectures, etc., that I've had, is that the Spanish Constitution was formed at a time when Franco just died and everybody was very scared, and I just don't think it's relevant anymore. I think it's not really... it's just not a modern democracy and how it should operate. I think...
Yeah, this was written in 1978, Angela, when it said was it 2 or 3 years after Franco had died is when they finalised it. Yeah.
And, there was coup d'etat, as you know, and, everybody was very scared, as they are now. I mean, even I, who have always been a fervent independentist, I'm getting very scared of what's happening. But at the same time, I think it's not fair. And if they really weren't scared about what potentially could happen and us declaring ourselves independent, then why on earth would they not allow a referendum like you just said we should have?
Well, I simply can't see, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, that when you had the Irish separatist movement, the uprising in 1916, they were very much in a minority. But the way the British dealt with that uprising, the way they rounded up the ringleaders and shot them. Now, I'm not suggesting they'll shoot Puigdemont, but they may well put him in prison for treason. How you deal with these things, I think, makes a massive difference. And I think the Spanish government are looking like thugs and bully boys supported by their mates in Brussels. It's ugly. Do you have, Angela, family still living in Catalonia?
Of course, most of my family. And the thing that we always ask ourselves is, why on earth have we not been treated in the same way as the Basques? I mean, they have a much higher degree of autonomy.
Yes.
And realistically, Nigel, the only reason why we haven't is because it's a bigger nation, and financially they rely a lot more on us. And it's not about money. Most of our friends are Spanish or half Spanish or Spanish origin. We don't hate Spanish people. We never have done. We just don't like to be treated unfairly by the Spanish government. And that's really the full stop of it.
No. And I get that. Angela, if it came to it and there was a full, free and fair referendum, which in the end there will be, in my view, there has to be. I just don't see this can go on the way that it is in the 21st century. But do you honestly think, given that every business will threaten to leave, given that you'll be told, even if you changed your minds, EU membership wouldn't be possible, do you actually think in a referendum, despite all the threats, I mean, sort of rather like the Project Fear you saw in this country, but times 10, do you think the Catalonian people still could vote for independence?
I would hope so. And I also would really draw the parallels with Brexit. There's a lot of scaremongering.
Yes.
And the thing is that Catalans are really quite culturally different from Spanish people. In Catalonia, the ambition is to be a bourgeois, to have money, to build lovely houses. In Spain, the ambition historically was always to be a person of leisure. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case now.
Right.
Spanish people value their leisure far and above anybody from Catalonia. And of course, culturally, we're all becoming, more and more similar. Everyone in the world is becoming more and more similar. But there's still differences. And I really believe that the majority of companies in Catalonia, when it actually came to it, would say, well, no, hang on a minute. We are Catalan and we have to defend our country. And I hope that would be the case anyway.
Angela, great phone call. Long time LBC listener, the first time she's ever picked up the phone. And thank you for that insight. The Catalonian people should be allowed a binding referendum to leave or remain. People all over the world want more say on local issues and not a one-size-fits-all big central government like the EU, says Darren from Bristol. Well, that's what's got the EU having kittens, Darren, is that here we've got a genuine independence movement, not a phony one like the Scots Nats, who, They couldn't say enough nice things about Scotland in Brussels. They wanted Scotland to leave the United Kingdom, divide and rule. But of course, Alex Salmond wanted very much at the time of that referendum for Scotland to be part of the EU. In fact, previous to that, he'd wanted Scotland to join the Euro. And he will be hosting a show this afternoon between 3 and 6 on LBC. Perhaps you might ask him about that. I wonder what he'd have to say. No surprise. The Spanish will not deport Brits. We take our own money there and support their country, says Johnny on Twitter. Yeah, well, absolutely we do. And yet, I mean, I was met in the referendum with these moronic arguments, as I say, as if they were all going to be rounded up. Mr. Farage, what would you say if Cornwall went independent because they want to be separate from England? Your opinion on that? Keith, not a cat's chance in hell, mate. There is a Cornish separatist movement. It has a few hundred members and no more than that. Ramona's all back Catalonia at the start. Then it was pointed out that the Catalans are anti-EU. Now they are all anti-Catalonia. Well, I think they are. Alfred is calling from East Ham. Alfred, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. I think Rajoy is trying to deal with this the way the Spanish government tried to deal with, do you remember the revolt, the Milans del Bosch, the general who tried to revolt and got there? I mean, this is nothing like that. I think this constitution was probably promulgated to deal with that former case. This is people asking for a say in who governs them. And I think the trouble is, if they'd done what the Catalans wanted years ago, they could have sat down quietly out of the public eye and how are we going to do it with Rajoy or whoever was in, and say, well, how are we going to manage this? Quietly, an opinion poll, a referendum, call it what you like, see what happens, and then work out how to go. I think Rajoy's got himself in a position now where he can't back down. I mean, they had to have 2 elections to get a government there, didn't they?
They did. They did.
They weren't exactly. So
why, Alfred? Why, Alfred, is Mrs May backing him as strongly as she did when she was asked this question on Friday at the summit in Brussels?
I don't think she wants to rock the boat in the middle of all the. She doesn't know which way the Brexit negotiations are going. I don't think she wants to be on the wrong side, I think, so at the moment.
Just go with the flow. Go with the flow. Support police brutality and the denial of democracy. I mean, if you look at it in those terms, it's pretty awful, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I spent a fair bit of time in Catalonia in the 80s. I was travelling around there with an elderly veteran of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion of the International Brigades.
Wow.
That's talking to people there. He's a lovely guy, American guy.
Yeah.
And he was fated there, and the stories we were getting from people, elderly guys in little villages. And I was talking to a guy who used to runs a cafe. I don't know if he's still there now. Runs a cafe in Girona, and he said, "Look, I'll speak to you in Catalan, in French, in Italian, a bit of German if you like." He said, "But I will not speak Castellano or Spanish." He said, "I could have been arrested in the street for 40 years if I spoke Catalan."
I know.
That still rankles. And quietly.
They've been sort of that culture had been suppressed, hasn't it? Alfred, great call, great stories. Must have been fascinating back in the 1980s when there were still people alive in serious numbers who'd fought in that civil war to go there. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:45. I'm asking you: is taking away autonomy from Catalonia complete oppression and the death of democracy, or is it just a fair thing for the Spanish government to be doing, given Article 155 of their constitution, which they intend to trigger? But before that, the World Health Organization has appointed the 93-year-old Robert Mugabe as a goodwill ambassador. That's right. The chap that has completely wrecked Zimbabwe, wrecked their healthcare system, who himself goes out of the country for his healthcare and led hundreds of thousands into starvation, and he's going to be a goodwill ambassador for the World Health Organization. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he thought it was a bad April Fool's Day joke. Well, we are told now that the WHO are rethinking that decision. Well, can you think a little harder, please? And what is it with all these OECDs and EUs and WHOs? Are all of these supranational organisations just mad? Is it because they're living on taxpayers' money and they frankly stop thinking? I don't know, but that one is just stone bonkers. Now, Mogmentum, Mogmania, Moggy, Mog. These are the kind of things I get sent to me every day on Twitter and text when I'm doing the show here. Well, tomorrow, for those of you that are Mog fanatics, and for those of you indeed that aren't, he's going to be here on LBC at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. No, not as a guest. He's going to be standing in for James O'Brien. He'll be here between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. tomorrow. So listen, ring. I think it's going to be absolutely enormous fun. He's doing it tomorrow, and there'll be different guest presenters every single day this week, names of which I think are being withheld at this stage. But it's Mog tomorrow for 3 hours. I've got to tell you, I'm definitely tuning in at 10 o'clock. I think it's going to be terrific. Right, back to this question of Catalonia, and I'm going to Dennis in Manchester. Dennis, good morning.
Hi, good morning there, Nigel. I'm calling really, excuse me, I have a really bad cough and cold
bad
here.
Luck. Bad luck. You and the Prime Minister, bad luck, Dennis, you know.
Hopefully I won't spill too many more words. I agree fully with Angela, what she's just said.
Yes.
In effect, I'm married to a Catalan lady. We lived over here for 38 years. She's worked in this country the whole time, done really well. And we have family back in Spain. We've just come back from Barcelona yesterday, after 2 weeks.
Yesterday?
Yes. The people there, in effect, they're just entirely ordinary people, and they're the ones who are behind this move, because they've had enough. The simple fact is, Catalonia is a region of Spain. Technically, yes, the referendum was completely illegal. It was against the Constitution. But as Angela said, the Constitution was written in 1978, 3 years after a 40-year-long dictatorship had taken place. And with a view to getting something which is acceptable, it was signed and agreed for then. With the internet and the way the world's changed, everything has changed dramatically since then. Last Monday, the Spanish government, in a very oppressive, heavy-handed way, put into prison 2 leaders of technically cultural groups. Yes, they're pro-separatists. They put them in prison, the 2 Georges.
Yep.
And on the day after, and knowing something was going on, I just went from the town 15 miles outside Barcelona into town to see what was going to be happening. I could not believe it. I got on the train. I thought I was going to a Neil Diamond concert. There were hundreds on the train of ordinary people, every age, but mainly middle-aged and above.
So Dennis, often when we think of separatist movements, independence movements, not always, but often, there is a tinge of extremism or the threat of the use of violence. One thinks of the Basque region in Spain, where there's been plenty of violence. Are you, in your own mind, convinced that the Catalan separatist movement are genuinely good people?
The one word which you'll hear from all of the politicians and all of the speakers to the Catalans is pacifista. We are people of peace. When they had the terrorist attack 2 months ago, the chant that they did against terrorists was, we are people of peace, som gender, the POW. We are people of peace. And the simple fact is that they will always avoid violence. They didn't engage in any violence when the police were beating them. They put their hands up in the air. There was 200,000 people on a Tuesday night, all with banners waving and appealing for the freedom of these 2 guys who've been put in prison.
Yeah,
and that was on 24 hours after.
And Dennis, when you flew back yesterday, was everything normal at the airport and everything happening as it should?
Yeah, yes, it is. But we took a walk down to the Ramblas along the coast, and we saw the troop ship which is out there.
Yes.
It has the picture of cartoons there. There are thousands and thousands of guys on there. Now these are fully testosterone soldiers brought in from other parts of Spain. They've been on this ship for 2 weeks. There are rumours that it is both disgusting, smelly. There are rats there. They have nothing to do. Do you think they're going to be nice and peaceful when they're given a job to do, go and look after gentle people?
Very thought-provoking. Dennis from Manchester, thank you for your eyewitness accounts of what's been going on there. My next caller is Nemesio, who is Spanish. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, it's about these two guys, the two Jordis that are in jail.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not in jail for nothing. A judge ordered, before the referendum, ordered the police to search some places where they were, the Generalitat were hiding the boxes and the voting boxes, etc. The police went in and with 4 or 5 cars, police cars. Are you there?
Yes, here you go. I'm listening.
Yeah. And these two guys jumped on the police cars with big loudspeakers. I saw that on the television. You need to watch these images.
Yeah.
And they're inciting the crowd. The crowd smashed the police cars, 4 or 5 police cars. They set fire to the police cars. And the Spanish police is inside the building searching for these papers, etc. And the Mossos de Escuadra, is the Catalan police, could not protect them. They were scared inside. So for this reason...
Okay, so you feel, Nemesio, these guys have behaved badly, and
Yes.
I listened very carefully to what you had to say there. On the bigger question here,
Yes.
and we've tried over the course of the last hour to listen to both sides of this argument. Ultimately, if Article 155 gets passed by the Senate on Friday, which it looks like it's going to be,
Yes.
and autonomy is removed, we do potentially have a pretty horrible situation. Do you? I mean, I think the solution to this would be you set a date 9 months down the road to have a referendum and solve this once and for all. I mean, am I right about that, or can you think of a better way?
Well, I think there should be elections, so the country, the Catalonia can vote for a new Catalonian government.
Well,
because these people are extremists.
Well, what if, Nemesio, what if these elections were held and the Catalans voted for a parliament that was even more pro-independence than the one that's there now?
Well, I doubt it. I don't think it will happen. But
Okay.
Still, they would be under the power of the tribunal. The power in Spain.
Yeah, well, the power in Spain, Nemesio, is certainly being felt, and I thank you. Scott says the UK should watch what happens in Spain. This is just the trailer. No, Scott, I disagree with that absolutely fundamentally. And a question here that I can't answer. Where do the Balearic Islands stand on the issue of Catalonia? Are they Spanish or Catalan? I don't know the answer to that. Someone let me know on tomorrow evening's show, please, what the solution is for that. You've been listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7 p.m.